want to welcome you in, and it is always good to be here in the Idea Collision. And I know that sounds funny, but typically we don't like to be in collisions. I know I've been in a few too many in my life, and not typically a good thing. But we're talking about a different type of collision here, putting ideas together. And the Bible says that iron sharpens iron. We kind of know that idiom. We're familiar with it, even if you're not familiar with the Bible that well. But we get the idea that putting ideas together, cultural ideas, philosophical ideas, that tends to in any area of life, that tends to weed out the inferior and come away with something that is more accurate or more practical. And spiritually, that's true. What we want to do is we want to take these different ideas, sometimes some that are that look paradoxical, and come away with something that is, whether we are discarding this one, say that's completely off, or this one's great, and I want this one over here, or whether we're putting them together and saying, these combine in a way that makes me look at things from a different perspective, and I'm maybe augmenting this view that I've had. However that works. How do these things pair together and produce a better idea? Last week we left off kind of talking about failure, and we approached it from the idea of independence and liberty. We were talking about, just to kind of catch it up if you didn't see it, the idea that really the younger generations specifically have decreasingly been independent. They a lot of times are not striking out on their own till late in their 20s and 30s. And the reason that we said this is because they've been encouraged to be independent, but they've not been really given any tools to do so. They're unprepared for adulthood. So when they get to that time to do that, what happens? They're very encouraged to do that, but they're afraid of it. And they're afraid for a very good reason. They are likely going to fail. They've been given no training, nothing, no reasonable expectation of success. So this is where we want to get to failure, and I want to kind of branch out into the ways we look at failure and the ways that we approach failure. So there's this paradoxical thing that we're going to look at, and these are the two different ways that we look at failure. So before we get into this, I want to, I tend to approach things from a child raising point of view. I see a lot of things through that lens. I have a lot of experiences in that in that category. But this works. You can look at these in whether you're a teacher, whether you're an employer, whether you're a mentor of some sort, of counselor, whatever sector of life that you have that that you are involved with other people, and especially if you are kind of involved in an overseeing type of a role, you'll understand. We want to put people in a position to succeed, obviously. So it doesn't have to be. There's a lot of application outside of child raising, but the two views that we're going to look at seem opposite, and so we'll get into it. And I want to understand true confidence. So we're looking at these generations that don't have confidence. True confidence does not come from a rah-rah type of a encouragement. True confidence comes from having familiarity with techniques and structure that make something happen positively or successfully. Right? Everyone fails. That's another thing. Everyone fails. So that's just an observation of humanity. We all fail. No one can be perfectly equipped for anything. We say you get out there and there's no such thing as a textbook situation. you learn and someone teaches you the best, but they can't teach you every combination of things that could possibly happen that you're going to encounter. And you're going to encounter something you weren't prepared for, and you're going to say, I've got a 50-50 chance of which word we're going to try, and you're going to try this one, and this was the best thing to do. That's just, that's life. So failure happens. So then, where do I take this? Well, I want to look at two ways we look at this. First of all, the first way I look at this is naturally. Failure is a bad thing, right? Failure is bad. I don't want to fail. We encounter things we want to avoid. That's our approach, right? I encounter it. I want to avoid it. All right. So, failure is humiliating. So, that's the first thing. Whether it's done in front of other people, or whether it's something that people find out about, failure says something about me. And here's why it's, humiliating. Whether I'm comparing myself to other people or not, failure says that I have a lack of something. I'm not talented enough. Right? I'm on a sports team. We tried. We didn't accomplish it. We weren't talented enough, right? Or it could say we're not smart enough. I tried this thing. I was, and I just didn't know what I was doing, and so it didn't work. The project didn't work. Whatever it was, it didn't work. So that would be the second thing. And there's probably an endless amount of these that this says, but things about me, or I wasn't strong enough, and I don't mean muscularly strong enough, but maybe some type of an internal emotional strength. I didn't have the endurance for it. I didn't have some type of internal thing that I needed to be able to accomplish this. I heard a story about a Navy SEAL. Now, this is physical strength, but it illustrates the point. He went through, I think it was Navy SEAL guy. There's a story that one person told another person, and I heard it secondhand. But so this guy went through the training, and at the end of the training, there's this like an obstacle course. So he goes through this whole obstacle course that they have to be able to do to pass the fitness test. And you do this, you're in. And at the end of the fitness test, whatever the obstacle course, whatever it is, there is a chin-up bar. And they made them do one chin-up. You have to do one chin-up. That's the end of the whole course. And he gets on the thing, and he's pulling up, and he got like the bar to like right here, and his arms just could not. His like elbows are shaking, and everything is. He could not do the chin-up. He's like, I literally came 1 inch from. He's like, I have failed. I'm got to be the only guy in history who failed getting into the Navy SEALs by 1 inch. And that's humiliating. I wasn't strong enough. I was almost strong enough. I just wasn't quite strong enough. Right, so that's application 1. Failure is bad. Application 2 is that failure is good. Well, that seems opposite to me. You say, well, I have a plan. I have a hypothesis, right? That's the idea. Like, this gets to the smarts idea. And I test it in life, whatever it is, and it doesn't work. I was going to try to get this kind of a job and do this. I was going to try to go to college, and I failed, or whatever it is. I had the plan, and it didn't work. So now I have an experience to draw on. I want you to think about some of the language that I already have referenced it without even trying. I have an experience. What do we call these a lot of times? We call them learning experiences, right? That's a learning experience. That's good to learn from something. Well, when we accumulate these learning experiences, what do we say about a person? We call them experienced. Now, not all experienced people haven't only failed, but they have accumulated a lot of failures in life that they can now draw upon and say, that didn't work. Now I'm going to do this. And then, boom, you get a success, right? So it's good. If this is where the paradox comes in, right? If something is good, it's to be pursued. If something is bad, it's to be avoided. So if failure is both good, we've seen some applications where it's good, and it's also bad, We've seen some applications where it's bad. How do I approach it? How do I approach something that is to be avoided and to be pursued? Because I can't do both at the same time. Right? It's paradox. Well, my first instinct is to avoid it. I try to avoid those things. We call this thinking ahead. I'm going to think ahead, use common sense, and I'm going to say, this is not a good, this is probably not going to work. And so I want to avoid that. Right? That's smart. In a lot of cases it is smart, but it's not always smart. There's a story of an investor in the Bible. He's one of 3 investors. And the other 2 investors go out. They're very successful. This investor was afraid of failure. And so what he essentially did was nothing. He put in our modern day, viewpoint, it would be putting it into a savings account, because savings accounts don't earn any interest. There was a time when I was a kid that I remember them getting like 2.5% or 3% or whatever. They don't really accumulate much interest anymore. So imagine you say, well, I didn't lose. His idea was, I didn't lose it. I still have the base principal sum of money. And so I'm winning because I'm not losing. And in the Bible story, it's like, no, actually you lose it. So he didn't do his job. His job was to be an investor and to come away with a net increase. So because he didn't do that, he didn't do his job, he had failed in his job, in his expectation. But there's this idea that I'm going to avoid failure, and that will be defined as success. So these are our 2 approaches. Now, as a mentor, I can do a disservice to people, any type of mentor, be it parent or employer, whatever, by not allowing them the opportunity to fail. I say, well, I'm gonna think ahead for them and say, you know what, I think they're gonna fail. I'm not gonna put them in a position to fail, so I'm not gonna let them try. Right? It's hard. It's hard not to jump in, especially when you can know that you can do it better. You can do it quicker. You can do it more efficiently. Whatever the thing is, think about it when you're a parent, right? You see your kid struggling with something, and he doesn't even know which way to turn the screwdriver, and you're like, "What are you doing?" You don't know, righty tighty, lefty loose. How do you not know that, right? I'm experienced, and so I know that. Why? Because I have turned screwdrivers before. There was a time where I did not know righty-tighty left. I forget that. And so I want to jump in. The first instinct is to grab the screwdriver from my son. Here, let me do that. That's my instinct. To take away an opportunity for him to figure it out. You know what? It takes 3 seconds for him to figure out it's going backwards. Oh, I've got to go the other way. Really. And now he will know that for the rest of his life. But if I keep jumping in every time the screwdriver goes wrong, he's never going to learn that. He's got to learn that. Oh, okay. And that's silly. That's like a 4, 5, 6-year-old person learning that skill. But it gets older and older and older, and we keep doing that. We keep jumping in every time they want to do something. Now, I understand it's important to jump in when a person is actually a physical danger to themselves. Like, well, I'm going to let them learn that sticking the knife into the electric socket that's not what you want to do. Come on, fail, and we'll learn the lesson. No, we want to keep them from self-harm, but we do want to allow them to fail. Or otherwise, I do a disservice to them. That's part of it. It's not all of mentoring, but that is a significant part of mentoring. And then to be there to correct when, okay, now let's put the pieces back together. That's another part of mentoring. Right? And what this does a number of things. Right? And this is approach number 1 still. It helps them develop problem-solving skills. That didn't work. What do I do? Right? Now, I might nudge them. I might tell them, hey, try this. But they develop problem-solving skills. That's the first thing it does. Second thing, it teaches them, in most cases, that failure is not the end of the world. You can fail and you can move on. You can survive a failure, even a pretty bad one. You can survive in most cases. And so it will lead them to try new things. I remember an occasion, and then this is in a religious sphere, where I took a verse. I was teaching a class. I was 19 years old, and I was teaching an adult class, and I took a verse out of context. I just looked through a concordance, and I was teaching a thing, and I picked a verse that kind of just in the concordance, it looked like it was on this topic. It was on a completely different topic. And when I tell you it was embarrassing, I can't even tell you what it was. That's how embarrassing it was. It's so embarrassing that I remember the feeling of that 30 years later. And I got corrected right there on the spot, because it was pretty egregious. You know what I do? I'm telling you, when I'm doing this now as a preacher, I'm looking at verses before, I'm looking at verses after, I'm looking at comparative verses. It was a very formative thing to me. I failed, but I learned to succeed. And so, that has developed a new talent, has developed a new skill that takes me in, and I'm like, okay, now I can do this because I have that talent, that skill. I can teach, I can preach, I can do other things. So it leads to successes, and that's the idea. Now, I want to look at the other approach that we often take, and this is an overcorrection, an overreaction to failure, and this is the idea from the perspective that failure is good. We talked about it being good, and then we just detailed how it can be good. But there is a thing that people do sometimes, that we treat failure as the good thing in and of itself, that the failure itself is good, and we start celebrating failure. You say, why? How would we celebrate failure? Well, let me show you a few ways. First of all, just because something has a good outcome, it does not mean that the thing itself is good. It means that it had some good results, but we should not necessarily it would be great if we could get the results a different way. We don't want to celebrate the thing that didn't go right. We want to celebrate the doing of the right thing at the end. Failure is not to be pursued. Right? Success is to be pursued. We should know that intrinsically. But I've noticed this, and these are some things I've noticed that happened simultaneously, whether they're causative or correlative, I don't know. That's for somebody else to decide. But I personally think they're causative, or have a causative relation. I've noticed, first of all, mentors have done poorer and poorer jobs in society on multiple levels. I've noticed that teachers have equipped students at a lower level. This is true. I go into Milwaukee, and they are people graduate from school with proficiency in just Milwaukee. It's the biggest city near me. In nothing, they can't read. They can't do math. It's almost zero. Graduating high school, public school graduating. The teachers are not doing their job. Now maybe that's not the teacher's fault. I don't know, but it seems like if you're not doing anything, at some point we have to look at the teachers. But it's not only the teachers. Parents are not equipping their kids. We've talked about that. I think a lot of this starts in the home. They're not equipping. They're not going through homework. They're not doing whatever. But whether it's educationally or whether it's morally, whatever it is, parents are not, mentors across the broad spectrum are not doing as good a job for whatever reason. And so we have kids that are, as we talked about, afraid of going out and trying because they're certain they're doomed to failure, and they are. As this has happened, another thing that I've noticed is that failure has become more celebrated in life. You say, how is failure celebrated in life? I'm going to show you a couple of illustrations. Let me look at a superhero. The first superhero was Superman, so far as I understand it. And I always hated the Superman storyline because one thing I could not understand. So Superman is he's got this weakness to kryptonite, which, if I understand correctly, is pieces of his planet. And I never understood that because I always thought, it's probably a good thing that his planet exploded, because if it hadn't, in an alternate universe, he would have been walking around on his planet, and he basically has an allergic reaction to his own planet. And it would have been awful big. It wouldn't have been just a little piece. I mean, his own planet would have killed him just walking around, because you can't get away from your planet if you're walking on it. That seems like a really bad storyline. So I never understood that. And then I heard the story of how kryptonite came to be, the problem. And it came to be the problem because originally they designed Superman with no flaws, not even kryptonite. That wasn't in the original, if I understand this correctly again. So they had to add something in, because after 2 or 3 comic books, they realized that this was going to be boring. People weren't going to, after 2 or 3, you knew how the story ended, right? As a guy with no flaws, he's indestructible. And now he's on a world of mortal people, essentially, that he can't lose to. Well, that's boring. You know how it's going to end. So they built in another thing. This is what they came up with. It seems like they could have come up with something else. But so they built that to make it, and now he's got one weakness. And so everybody is the race to try to get kryptonite to defeat Superman, which also seems boring to me. Anyway, well, the point I want to draw from this is that when we first designed a superhero, or when we wanted a superhero, we wanted a man or woman, whatever, with no flaws. Isn't that interesting? Now, it got boring, but that was the first idea, flawless. That's the ideal. And as time has gone on, the people that we hold up as heroes have become more and more and more flawed as we have become, and we start celebrating the less prepared for success we individually are, the more we idealize people who fail. I want you to think, and as I say, I reference politics on occasion. It's not political points, but these are just observations that illustrate a point. And you can do this from either side. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your political view is. I want you to look at a person today and compare them in the political spectrum from whatever side you want to a person 70 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever. And understanding that we know that all humans are flawed, and even they were flawed. But what we knew about them, that media being what it was, we didn't always know. We didn't know what JFK was really into. Had we known, he would not have been the nominee. But you look at the nominee now. Pick one. You're a Democrat. Okay. That's fine. William Clinton, right? Or Joseph Biden. Go back and compare them to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Jimmy Carter. Look at them morally speaking, and look at how things have declined today. Now that we are in a realm where everything is flawed and where we celebrate failure. You're a Republican. Oh, good for you. Compared Donald Trump, morally speaking, to a person like Ronald Reagan or Dwight Eisenhower. Right? Look, I'm not saying those men were perfect. I'm saying there's a decline now as we're celebrating moral failure. We no longer want heroes that are flawless. We want heroes that are like us. We hold up, the people that we hold up in the highest positions in society are from Hollywood, and they're completely flawed. So this has religious applications as well. And think of some of the religious language. You can turn on a religious station, listen to the religious music if you want to do that. And you will hear phrases like, we are sinners, I'm just a sinner, and we all sin. And it is this emphasis on the failure aspect of our faith. Now, yes, those are true statements. I do sin. I make mistakes. I fail. But it is almost a celebration of failure. Now, that's not the ideal. Those statements, we are sinners, or I am a sin, like it's now accentuating the present continuous nature of and accepting the identity. Think of it. I'm accepting the identity as a sinner. Not, I've sinned. Okay. It's now going to my identity. It's just accepted that this is my identity. Instead of reaching for the ultimate thing that I want, I'm celebrating the weakness, the inability. It's all throughout our society. There's a reference in the Bible to people who have this character, this nature to celebrate failure. And Paul says, should we go on sinning so that grace may abound? Right? Should we continue to pursue the failure so that we can say, hey, something good came from it? Right? Grace came from it, so we should continue to do these awful things. Well, that is obvious. It's a rhetorical statement because it's so obviously not true. Right? Paul states that as a rhetorical statement, but there are people who think that, yeah, I think we should. That sounds like a good pursuit, a good plan. Right? We want to emphasize the pursuit of success, whether it be morally, whether it be talents, whatever it is, with your kids, with your students, with your employees, however you are a mentor, however, in your own life. We want to celebrate success. We acknowledge, this is a thing of the ideal versus the practical. I want to acknowledge the practical application of things, that I am going to not succeed from time to time. But on the other hand, we look at the ideal. I want to pursue the ideal of things, and that is success. I use my failures to establish a success. Right? And so what I want you to do this week, whether it's for you or for those around you, the first thing is to develop an awareness of failure language. Right? The language that allows people to continue to fail and feel good about it. Right? That's not helpful to them. It's not helpful to me. Whoever it is. And that's recognizing. That's the first step. The second step is not accepting it. Not accepting it as a goal, not accepting it as a reality or as an identity. Right? Simply understanding one thing. Recognizing that from failure can come success. That's the goal, to go out there to say, okay, I failed. How now do I continue and produce something? Because when I do that, I'm going to learn other things. I'm going to be more productive. I'm going to develop a history of experience that I can, help other people. I can do I can accomplish a lot of things, and then I can be an experienced person. And then I can pass that on to other people, and then I can train them and let them fail. And it's in your children. Let your children do something safe, but let them fail. Give them room to fail. Encourage them when they're done. Give them steps and guidance. But failure is a reality, but success is the goal. Understand the difference between the two. Start this week, and we will see you next week.